Hi, thanks for stopping by. I'm Liz. Welcome to my studio. Let's do a little stitching. Okay, so before you start stitching, what you're going to want to do is decide how thick of a line you want to use for your stitch. Now, I like a really thick line, so I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle with 3 strands of embroidery floss doubled. So remember, you don't want your thread to be longer than from about your fingertips up to your elbow. So I'm going to cut that. And I like to double mine back on itself because then I don't have to worry about stitching on the go. When I have it in my bag, I'm not going to worry about losing my needle or anything like that. So I'm simply going to divide my floss into 2 sets of 3 strands each. This could be 3 sets of 2 strands. You could just simply, if you like a finer line, use 1 strand doubled back on itself to make 2. I usually use, because I use split stitch so much, I at least use a doubled strand so that I have 2 strands. Okay, so here's 1 strand, and I'm just going to thread my needle. I always like to snip my threads again so it's nice and sharp when I want to thread my needle. And for threading your needle, get your thread way down in your fingers, bring the needle to the thread, and then almost release the fibers into the eye of the needle as you sort of move that needle down. Of course, because I'm trying to do it on camera, it's not doing it. Let's try this one more time. There we go. So I'm just going to pull my thread through, make sure it's not getting any kinks in it. This is a little long. I was talking and doing it. You want yours a little bit shorter than this. And then I simply knot the end. I usually use a quilter's knot and go ahead and snip this so it's a little bit shorter. Now the nice thing with this too is if you wanted to combine colors, you could. You don't have to use the same colors. You could combine like a pink and a green or a blue and a green and use that. So now your thread is, or your needle's threaded and you're ready to go. So let's talk about getting the fabric in the hoop. Here is the easiest way to do it. You want your fabric to be nice and tight in your hoop. So you're going to lay the hoop that does not have the metal on it on the table. You're going to lay your fabric over that. You're simply going to press the other hoop down on top of it, and then you begin to tighten. So righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. You can start to pick it up when it's tight enough. You just keep tightening down. And this is something you might have to do as you're stitching. It does tend to come unscrewed just a little bit. And you can go around and just pull your edges down till you get this nice taut, like a drum, your fabric in your hoop. You can hear that. Just like that. Tighten it a little more, and away you go. Okay, so let's go over the stitches that are used in your mermaid kit. It may look complicated, but it's deceptively simple. I'll go over each stitch and then you can use whatever stitch you want where you would like to use it. You don't have to do it the same way I did. You don't have to use the same colors where I did. Your mermaid could have pink hair and a brown tail. You could have yellow fish and blue stars. You could have pink plants. You can do it whatever you want to do. I'm just going to tell you what I did and give you a demonstration so you have the tools you need to go ahead and work on your project. Okay, so the first stitch we're going to talk about is one of my favorite stitches. I use it all the time. I used it in these kelp leaves. I used it in the banner. I used it in the lettering. I used it for her hair. I didn't use it for her body, but I could have easily used it for the body, used it to outline the stars, used it in the stems of the kelp, and that is split stitch. So I'm going to show you how to do split stitch. Okay, so we'll start with split stitch. This is probably the stitch I use the most, and I just want to give you a really good demonstration. So you're going to come up from the back, you'll come forward. I like to say about the grain of size of a grain of rice. Now there are two different ways to do split stitch. I like to do it this way. It uses more thread, but I prefer the look. So this is how I'm going to show you. You may already know the other way, and go ahead and use that. We'll review that too, just so you know it. I come up about a stitch length away, a little less, and I'm going to go back down into my original stitch. Don't panic if you haven't divided it exactly in half. That's okay, it won't matter too much. So here we go again, we come up, I should say the length of about half of a stitch, not a full stitch. From the back, and we go down into the center of our stitch, like this. And this is great for when you have curving lines. When you do rows of it, it looks incredible. It starts to look like a tapestry. You could use this instead of stem stitch or chain stitch. Those are all kind of stitches you could use in place of this if you wanted to try those. So I just keep coming up about a half a stitch length, and then I go back down again. Now, the other way to do it is you can come up, you can go forward, and then you can come from behind in the center of your stitch and then move forward. It doesn't use as much thread when you do it this way, and it has a slightly different look. You may like this look better. When I'm mending, I do it the other way because it gives me more coverage on the underneath. The backside has more thread. You come up from behind in the middle of your stitch. Now you can see why sometimes it's a little tricky to find the middle of your stitch, and then come back down. So that's chain stitch two ways. The next stitch that I used is a straight or satin stitch, and that is what I used for this shadowing here. That is what I used. Okay, let's do satin stitch. There are several different ways you can do satin stitch. You usually use it to fill something in. If you're filling something in, I'm going to make a little circle here using back stitch, and you want to have an outline. Maybe let's say you want to have an outline in a different color or something. You would go ahead and do this stitch so that you, oops, got a little tangle back here, hold on, so that you are leaving the back stitch so that it shows. If you want to sort of pad the stitch and have it be a little more raised, you can make a simple shape and fill it in with a rice stitch or even just more random stitches, more back stitch, and you would stitch over that. So I'm going to show this to you first. Make a little circle. We'll do half of it one way and half of it the other way, so that you can see the difference. Okay. Simply creating our shape to start with. finish this up here. So now we have a little circle. And I'm going to go ahead and half of the circle, I'm going to leave the outline showing. So I'm going to come up right next to that outline. I'm going to go across and I'm going to come back down in. Now, I can either come right next to this stitch or come back across and come up over here. That's up to you, depending on how judicious you want to be with your use of thread. And you can see I'm completely covering. There's no background that you're seeing. I'm getting full coverage. And it's nice and smooth. This is a great filling stitch. So I would just continue on until I get to the other side of that circle. Now I'm getting quite a bit of loft anyway, but let's say I don't want that outline and I want it to be really sort of have a lot of height to it and be nice and firm. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to add some cushioning stitches sort of in the form of rice stitch behind. Maybe one more. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up on the outside of my outline. And I'm going to be right next to it. I'm just going to really work hard to keep that a nice clean line. I'm going to come across. I'm going to try and leave a little bit of space between my two sections so you can see the difference. And I'm going to come up right next. And again, I could underneath, come up on the other side if I wanted to. Right next to, you can see that this looks different. It is a little more raised. The edge is a little more defined because it's going right next to that stitch outline that we laid down. It's a little cleaner look. It just depends what look you are going for. And we're filling our circle in. And that is satin stitch. There you go. The next stitch I used is a back stitch. That's what I used to outline her body. Now, I think if I was going to do it again, I'd go ahead and use a split stitch. I actually prefer split stitch, but this is a straight stitch, so to make it more of a sampler, you can go ahead and use a back stitch. I also used the back stitch for her face, the details on her face, and I used it, actually I think those are the only places I used the back stitch. So that we'll go over the back stitch and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so we are going to do a little chain stitching. So chain stitching is exactly what it sounds like. You're making a chain from one stitch to the next. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to come down close to where I came up, and I'm going to leave a little loop of thread. I like to leave my loop fairly big because it's starting to twist. We don't really love that. But what I'm going to do is I can put my needle in there to kind of separate it out for myself. Hold on. So we've created this little loop. We're going to come up in that loop about where we want our stitch to be, how long we want it. And we're going to do the exact same thing, come up and go back down in the loop. So that's our first link of our chain. Now we're going to do our second one. You can see if you leave the hole pretty big, it's a little easier to do. We're going to come back down. This is a great organic looking stitch. You can turn these into stems and leaves and all kinds of things. I'm going to come up in the hole, just make sure you're right in the middle of your thread, and go back down again. That is chain stitch. Now to end it, I want to show you how to end it. You're going to make your last stitch and you're going to come up in that hole like this, and you're going to make it tight, and you're just going to come down and tack down that last chain so that it holds. That's your chain stitch. This guy got a little bit long, but that's okay. I'm trying to hold it in front of the camera so you can see. That's a fun one you can use to outline, to do all kinds of stuff with. Okay, so the next stitch I used was a very simple stitch, a satin stitch. Now I didn't use it for coverage, which makes it even easier. I used it here to create shadows. I used it for the fish's fins and to create the detail in the tail. And I actually used it to create the scales. I just formed the scales with a simple straight satin stitch, or back stitch really, for the scales. You'll see how similar they are when I show you how to do satin stitch. Okay, let's do satin stitch. There are several different ways you can do satin stitch. You usually use it to fill something in. If you're filling something in, I'm going to make a little circle here using back stitch, and you want to have an outline. Maybe let's say you want to have an outline in a different color or something. You would go ahead and do this stitch so that you, oops, got a little tangle back here, hold on, so that you are leaving the back stitch so that it shows. If you want to sort of pad the stitch and have it be a little more raised, you can make a simple shape and fill it in with a rice stitch, or even just more random stitches, more back stitch, and you would stitch over that. So I'm going to show this to you first. Make a little circle. We'll do half of it one way and half of it the other way, so that you can see the difference. Okay. Simply creating our shape to start with. I'm going to finish this up here. So now we have a little circle. And I'm going to go ahead and half of the circle, I'm going to leave the outline showing. So I'm going to come up right next to that outline. I'm going to go across and I'm going to come back down in. Now, I can either come right next to this stitch or come back across and come up over here. That's up to you, depending on how judicious you want to be with your use of thread. And you can see I'm completely covering. There's no background that you're seeing. I'm getting full coverage. And it's nice and smooth. This is a great filling stitch. So I would just continue on until I get to the other side of that circle. Now I'm getting quite a bit of loft anyway, but let's say I don't want that outline and I want it to be really sort of have a lot of height to it and be nice and firm. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to add some cushioning stitches, sort of in the form of rice stitch behind. Maybe one more. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up on the outside of my outline. And I'm going to be right next to it. I'm just going to really work hard to keep that a nice clean line. I'm going to come across. I'm going to try and leave a little bit of space between my two sections so you can see the difference. And I'm going to come up right next. And again, underneath, you know, come up on the other side if I wanted to. Right next to, you can see that this looks different. It is a little more raised. The edge is a little more defined because it's going right next to that stitch outline that we laid down. It's a little cleaner look. It just depends what look you are going for. And we're filling our circle in. And that is satin stitch. There you go. The next stitch that I use a lot in my work is what's called a rice stitch, and you can see that right here. Now that's simply taking your straight stitch or your back stitch and just separating it and having them go in all different directions. I like to use it as a filling stitch. It's less dense than if I embroidered this whole piece, and I just think it's way more visually interesting. So I will show you how to do a rice stitch. Okay, so now we're going to do a little rice stitch. We will come up from behind and we'll make one stitch, and then we'll go ahead and do another stitch next to it, but we're going to point it in a different direction, sort of on a diagonal. Now, one thing to think about when you're doing these stitches is you really want them to look random. So kind of have the directions of your stitches facing all different directions. If you want to make the stitches look uniform, well, as far as spacing goes, because they're not going to look uniform because they're all going different directions, but you can keep them sort of equally spaced, which is what I'm doing here. When I'm doing them, I really like an organic look. If I was filling in a shape, I'd do it like this. I'd put them much closer together too. I'd go ahead and start adding some right up next to the stitches that already exist, like this. So say I wanted this to really look nice and blue, I'd go ahead and just kind of cluster them really close together. What I really like to do is make them fairly random, like have one here, maybe one or two over here. This helps give your sort of your whatever you're using them for a more organic look. So you have to just think about what your goal is. Is it to fill something in? Is it to create texture? Is it to create a pattern or an organic look on something found in nature that you're depicting? Then you can add, you know, a few more by coming further over here. And that is rice stitch. Just really focus on keeping them going in different directions. They don't always have to be the same length. If you're going to make them different lengths, make them obviously different lengths. Like I'll put a longer one here so that it looks intentional. You can see that one looks intentional. I'll add a short one next to it. So we know that we really wanted that one to look long. And we'll put another long one over here so he's not all alone. So just play around. This is a really fun stitch to use. I use this one a lot. The final stitch you need to know is the French knot. You can see I've used that for the fish's eyes. I've used it for the mermaid's chest. I've used it in her tail. It's not actually the final stitch you need to know. I take that back because I need to show you how to couch this for her body here. But that's how I get these really nice little knots. It's called a French knot. So I'm going to show you how to do a French knot. So let's make some French knots. You're going to come up from behind. And for this, you need two hands. You're going to keep it nice and taut between the fabric and the hand that is holding the thread. You're going to take your needle and you're going to circle that thread around your needle maybe 2 or 3 times, depending on how big you want your knot to be. You're going to go in right next to where you came up, and you'll keep this taut. That's the secret. I'm going to reach underneath. Oops, first I'm going to push it down a little more. Make sure I get a clean grab underneath. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull, keeping that tightness on there until the very end, my needle down. So there's a French knot. So we're going to come up. We're going to circle it. Let's do this 2 times, make a little smaller one. Put the needle right down in next to where we came up, keeping that tension on the thread. We'll pull this down and make another knot. These are great to cluster together to get lots of texture. You can use them for eyes, you can use them for the center of flowers, you can use them to dot letters, you can use them for just about any place you want to make a little circle that has some texture to it. You can use a French knot. There you go. The last thing you need to learn how to do is how to couch down embroidery thread. And that's simply where you lie the thread across and you're going to stitch over it. Here I've created kind of a plaid pattern in her tail. I'm not saying that you have to do that, but if you want to, I'll show you how to do it. I realized that I didn't tell you I did her earrings with a back stitch. I think I told you her hair is the split stitch. The tail is just straight stitches, and they just change direction here, and then in between is a chain stitch. So those are the stitches you need to do your mermaid. If you have any questions, you can message me on Instagram or email me or send me a message through my website. Happy stitching. Just remember, you don't have to keep her in the hoop. You can use your pattern sticker on a bag or a pillow or a jacket or a shirt, whatever you want to do, even a sweatshirt, because the sticker will stabilize your stitches while you're stitching. To get rid of your sticker that you're stitching through, you're simply going to, I like to soak it in warm water and then hold it under the running water to really just wash it clean. Then gently press it. I press with a towel over or turn it over and have her facing your stitches right side down into a towel and press from the back. That's the best way to sort of block and finish your project. All right, happy stitching.